Hello there, and welcome to the Sleep with Science channel. Before we get started, if you love exploring the depths of space as much as we do, take a second to like the video or subscribe. It's a simple action, but it helps the channel to reach more curious minds like yours. Now let's begin, drifting gently into a question that has haunted every traveler who has ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what lies beyond the edge of what we know. Close your eyes if you'd like, and let your shoulders soften, let your breath slow, because tonight we are not staying on Earth. Tonight we are leaving it behind entirely, slipping past the moon, past the last fragile glow of sunlight on Neptune's frozen face, out into a darkness so vast that the very idea of direction begins to lose its meaning. Here is a question to carry with you into that darkness. If you were floating out there, past the last light of the sun, with no ground beneath you and no walls around you, how would you ever find your way back home? Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally. What would you use? Your eyes. The stars themselves are drifting, slowly, silently, each one racing through the galaxy at speeds that would stagger the mind, so the very sky you might use as a map is quietly rewriting itself every single moment. There is no fixed point in deep space. No North Star waiting patiently to guide you. No compass that means anything at all, because a compass needs a magnetic field, and out there, past the reach of any planet's protective embrace, there is nothing for a needle to point toward. Even light, that faithful old messenger we trust to show us what is real, becomes a kind of liar the farther out you go, because the stars you see are not where they are anymore. You are looking at ghosts. You are looking at the past. Some of that light left its source before humans learned to build fire, before the pyramids, before the first word was ever spoken, and it is only now, this very moment, touching your eye. So if the stars themselves are unreliable, if the sky is a memory rather than a map, what does that mean for the idea of finding your way home? Let that question settle over you like a blanket, warm and heavy, as we drift further into the black. We tend to imagine space the way we imagine an ocean, vast, yes, but navigable, with landmarks and coastlines and a horizon that eventually gives way to shore. But space is nothing like an ocean. An ocean has a bottom. It has currents that move in patterns we can learn. It has a surface that reflects the sun and tells you, without fail, which way is up. Space offers none of these comforts. There is no up. There is no down. There is no gentle current nudging you toward familiar waters. There is only distance, impossible, almost unthinkable distance, stretching out in every direction at once, indifferent to your presence, indifferent to your longing for the small blue world you left behind. Consider, for a moment, just how far that world truly is once you have crossed into the space between stars. The nearest star system to our own, Alpha Centauri, sits over 4 light-years away, a distance so enormous that even our fastest spacecraft, hurtling through the vacuum at tens of thousands of miles per hour, would take tens of thousands of years to arrive. And that is merely our closest neighbor. Beyond it, the galaxy unfolds into 100 billion more stars, scattered across a disk so wide that light itself takes 100,000 years to cross from one edge to the other. Within a space that large, the idea of a straight line home starts to feel almost absurd. Which direction would you even choose? Every direction looks the same. Black and cold, and scattered with pinpricks of light that offer no real guidance, only the illusion of one. This is the strange, quiet terror that early astronomers began to sense long before we ever left the ground, a terror wrapped in wonder, because the same vastness that makes space frightening is what makes it sacred. It is why sailors once used the stars to cross oceans, trusting patterns that seemed eternal and fixed, never realizing that on a long enough timescale, even those patterns shift and dissolve. The constellations your grandparents knew are not quite the constellations your grandchildren will see. The sky itself is a slow, ancient river, flowing so gradually that a human lifetime barely registers as a ripple. And it is into this river, this shifting, light-drenched, endlessly deep river of stars, that we now begin our journey, not to conquer it, not to solve it, but simply to understand why the idea of finding your way home out there is so much stranger, so much more delicate, than anything we experience beneath our familiar sky, where the sun rises each morning in the same patient place, and the moon still remembers. Where it belongs in the sky each night, faithful, familiar, close enough to touch with nothing more than a good pair of eyes and a quiet evening. That closeness, that gentle familiarity, is the first thing you lose when you leave. And it happens faster than you might expect. Even at the edge of our own solar system, barely a whisper of true interstellar distance, the sun itself begins to shrink into something unrecognizable. From the icy reaches of the Kuiper Belt, where frozen worlds drift in eternal twilight, our sun is no longer the warm golden disk we know. It becomes a single brilliant point of light, indistinguishable at a glance from any other star scattered across the darkness. Imagine that for a moment. The star that gives you warmth, that grows your food, that marks your days and seasons, reduced to nothing more than a pinprick among countless other pinpricks. If someone placed you there, in that frozen silence, and asked you to point toward home, could you do it? Could you tell the difference between the sun and any other star glittering in that endless field? Most people could not. And this is only the beginning of the disorientation, because the deeper you travel, the less even light itself can help you. Light, out there, stops behaving like a beacon and starts behaving like a puzzle. It travels in straight lines, yes, patient and constant, but straight lines mean very little when you have no reference point to measure them against. On Earth, a straight line has meaning because you have the ground beneath you, the horizon around you, gravity holding you gently in place, telling your body without words which way is down. But strip away the ground, strip away the gravity, and a straight line becomes just another abstraction floating in the void, no more useful than a memory. This is part of why deep space missions rely so heavily on something far older and stranger than instinct, something astronomers quietly call the fixed stars, even though, as we already discovered, no star is ever truly fixed. Spacecraft navigators use distant stars as reference points not because those stars are perfectly still, but because they are so incomprehensibly far away that their motion, from our perspective, appears agonizingly slow, slow enough to be useful for a human lifetime, slow enough to be trusted, at least for a while. It is a kind of beautiful deception, one we willingly accept, borrowing stillness from stars we know are moving, simply because the alternative, an ever-shifting sky with no anchor at all, would be too disorienting to navigate by. And even this borrowed stillness has its limits. The famous Voyager probes, humanity's furthest travelers, so far from home now that their radio signals, moving at the speed of light, take over 20 hours just to reach us, still rely on careful, painstaking calculations from teams of scientists back on Earth, constantly adjusting, constantly recalculating, because even the smallest error in direction, a fraction of a single degree, can mean missing your destination by millions of miles. Let that sink into the quiet of your mind for a moment. A fraction of a degree. That is the difference between arriving somewhere meaningful and drifting forever into nothingness. Now imagine you did not have a team of scientists on Earth, meticulously tracking every angle, every velocity, every subtle gravitational tug from distant planets pulling you ever so slightly off course. Imagine you were alone out there, with only your own eyes and your own memory to guide you. How long do you think you could last before every direction began to look exactly the same? Before the silence itself became disorienting, wrapping around you like a heavy fog, until up and down, near and far, forward and backward all melted into one formless, star-flecked dark. This is not meant to frighten you, not tonight, not here, safe and warm wherever you are listening from. It is meant, instead, to help you feel, just for a little while, the strange and humbling scale of the universe we call home, a universe so large that the very concept of finding your way back becomes almost philosophical rather than practical. Astronomers often describe space using a term that sounds almost too gentle for something so vast. They call it the interstellar medium, the thin, cold whisper of gas and dust that fills the space between stars. It is not empty, not truly, but it is close enough to nothing that human senses were never built to comprehend it. Out there, sound cannot travel, for there is no air to carry it. Out there, warmth fades almost instantly, for there is nothing to hold on to heat. Out there, distance is measured not in miles or kilometers, numbers far too small and familiar to be of any real use, but in light years, a unit born from necessity, a quiet admission that ordinary measurement simply collapses under the weight of true cosmic scale. And it is within this scale, this impossible, breathtaking scale, that our search for a way home truly begins to reveal its deepest, most fascinating complications, the kind that reveal themselves slowly, the way shapes emerge from fog, one soft edge at a time. Because even if you could somehow remember the exact point from which you departed, even if your mind held onto that memory with perfect clarity, the truth is that the point itself would no longer be there. This is perhaps the strangest secret of deep space travel, stranger even than the vastness of the distances involved. Home does not wait for you. It moves. Earth itself is never still, not for a single moment, though it feels perfectly steady beneath your feet. Right now, as you rest and listen, you are spinning through space at almost 70,000 miles per hour, carried along in Earth's endless orbit around the Sun. And the Sun, too, is not still. It is racing through the Milky Way at hundreds of miles per second, dragging our entire solar system along with it, tracing a slow, graceful spiral around the galactic center, a journey so long that a single orbit takes over 200 million years to complete. Let that settle for a moment in the quiet dark. The last time our solar system was in this exact position within the galaxy, dinosaurs had not yet walked the Earth. So when we speak of home, we are not speaking of a fixed point at all. We are speaking of a location in constant motion, a place that exists only as a fleeting coordinate in an ever-shifting cosmic dance. If you left for even a few years, home would not simply be far away, it would be somewhere else entirely, having quietly slid forward along its vast orbital path while you were gone. This is why the old, comforting notion of retracing your steps falls apart so completely once you leave the boundaries of everyday experience. On Earth, retracing your steps is simple, almost automatic. The trail you walked is still there. The road still curves the same way. The landmarks remain patiently in place, waiting for your return. But in deep space, there is no trail. There are no footprints hanging in the vacuum, no fading path marking where you have been. Every motion you make, every drift and turn, disappears the instant it happens, leaving behind nothing but silence and empty dark. Even your own spacecraft, if you had one, would offer little comfort, because a spacecraft only knows where it is through careful measurement, constant observation, endless comparison between its position and distant reference points, a process demanding instruments far more precise than human senses could ever hope to be. Let your mind rest gently on this idea for a while, this quiet realization that motion in space is fundamentally different from motion on Earth, not just in scale, but in nature itself. When you walk across a room, your body understands, instinctively, that it is moving relative to the walls, the floor, the furniture around you. Your inner ear, that small and remarkable organ tucked inside your skull, constantly senses gravity, constantly whispers to your brain which way is down, allowing you to balance, to orient, to feel grounded even with your eyes closed. But in space, gravity offers almost none of that guidance. Drift far enough from any planet or star, and your inner ear falls silent, unable to detect a direction that no longer meaningfully exists. Astronauts who have spent extended time in orbit often describe a strange and disorienting sensation upon returning to Earth, a lingering confusion in their sense of up and down, a quiet reminder that the human body, brilliant as it is, was built for a world with solid ground and steady gravity, not for the boundless freedom of open space. Now imagine that disorientation stretched not across weeks in low orbit, but across months or years in the deep, empty spaces between stars. Imagine the slow erosion of certainty, the way your sense of direction might dissolve entirely, replaced by nothing but starlight and silence and the steady hum of your own heartbeat in your ears. It is a strange kind of vulnerability, one that most of us never have to confront in our daily lives here on Earth, wrapped as we are in gravity's gentle, invisible embrace. And yet it is precisely this vulnerability that makes the universe feel so vast, so humbling, so quietly sacred. Because in order to survive out there, in order to have any hope of finding your way, you cannot rely on instinct alone. You must rely on mathematics, on physics, on careful, patient calculation, translating the language of stars and light and gravity into something a human mind can actually use. This is why space agencies spend years developing navigation systems capable of accounting for the motion of everything, the drift of stars, the pull of distant planets, the constant, subtle shift of your own spacecraft's position relative to a universe that refuses to hold still. It is a beautiful, almost impossible puzzle, one that reminds us just how remarkable it is that we have ever managed to send anything beyond our own world at all, let alone bring it safely home again, guided only by numbers, light, and the quiet, unwavering patience of scientists watching from a world that never stops turning. Let us drift a little deeper now into how this patient, careful work actually unfolds, because there is something profoundly comforting in understanding the method behind mystery, even as the mystery itself remains vast and humbling. Spacecraft navigators, tucked away in control rooms lit by the soft glow of monitors, spend their days speaking in a language built almost entirely from angles and light. One of their most trusted tools carries a name that sounds almost like poetry: celestial navigation, a technique so old that sailors once used a version of it to cross entire oceans, guided only by the stars above and a simple instrument called a sextant. In space, this ancient idea takes on a new and far more delicate form. Spacecraft measure the precise angles between distant stars and their own position, comparing those angles again and again, refining their sense of place the way a sculptor slowly refines a block of stone, removing uncertainty one careful measurement at a time. It is slow. It is meticulous. And it is, in its own quiet way, breathtakingly beautiful, because it means that even in the emptiness of deep space, humanity has found a way to listen to the stars, not for their light alone, but for the story that light can tell about position, about distance, about the fragile thread connecting a tiny metal spacecraft to a small blue world spinning quietly, impossibly far away. But stars are not the only storytellers out there. Radio waves, invisible and silent to human ears, carry their own quiet form of guidance. Deep Space Network antennas, massive dishes scattered across the Earth in California, Spain, and Australia, spend their days and nights listening for the faint whispers of distant spacecraft, signals so weak by the time they arrive that they measure in mere billionths of a watt, fainter than a candle flame seen from millions of miles away. And yet, from these faint signals, scientists can calculate extraordinary things: how far a spacecraft has traveled, how fast it is moving, even the subtle curve of its path through space, bent ever so slightly by gravity, by distant planets, by the sun's own quiet pull reaching out across millions of miles like an invisible hand. Consider, for a moment, the strange elegance of this process, this idea that a whisper of radio energy, traveling for hours across the void, can carry within it enough information to tell us not just where something is, but where it will be, days, months, even years into the future. It is a kind of trust unlike any other, trust placed not in instinct, not in memory, not in the comforting familiarity of landmarks, but in mathematics itself, in the quiet certainty that the universe, however vast, however dark, still obeys patterns we can learn to understand. And yet, even with all of this knowledge, all of this careful calculation, there remains something deeply humbling about deep space, something that no amount of mathematics can fully soften. Because for all our instruments, for all our patient listening and careful measuring, we are still, In the end, incredibly small, drifting across a canvas so large that even our most powerful telescopes can only see a fraction of what exists. The observable universe alone stretches across roughly 93 billion light-years, a number so large it barely means anything to the human mind, and yet that number describes only the portion of the universe we are capable of seeing, limited by the simple fact that light itself has only had so much time since the beginning of everything to travel toward us. Beyond that boundary, there may be more, so much more, stars and galaxies and unimaginable structures forever hidden from our view, not because they do not exist, but because their light has simply not had time to reach us yet, and perhaps never will. Sit with that thought for a while, gently, without fear, the way you might sit beside a vast, dark ocean at night, aware of its depth without needing to see all the way to the bottom. There is a strange comfort in accepting that some things remain unknown, that the universe does not owe us a complete map, that mystery itself can be a kind of gift rather than a threat. Because it is precisely this unknown vastness that gives meaning to the small, fragile certainty of home, the warmth of a bed, the sound of rain against a window, the steady, reliable rising of the sun each morning. Perhaps this is why the question of finding your way home in deep space feels less like a technical puzzle and more like a quiet meditation on belonging itself, a reminder that home is not simply a location marked by coordinates, but a feeling woven from familiarity, gravity, light, and time, all working together in ways so delicate that we rarely stop to notice them until we imagine what it might feel like to lose them entirely, drifting instead through a silence so vast, so endless, so utterly indifferent to human longing, that even the concept of a direction, a way, a path, begins to dissolve. Consider, for a moment, what it actually means to find your way anywhere. On Earth, direction is a gift we rarely question. North is a needle settling gently toward a magnetic pole. Down is the ground rising up to meet your feet. Home is a place you can point to, a set of streets, a particular slant of afternoon light through a particular window. But strip away the earth, strip away the sun, strip away every familiar reference point, and what remains to point toward at all? In deep space, there is no up. There is no down. There is no fixed floor beneath the universe, no ceiling above it, no compass that means anything at all, because a compass only works in relation to something, and out there, past the edge of everything you have ever known, the somethings become vanishingly few and impossibly far. Space itself, we forget, is not a stage on which things merely sit. It is not a silent room waiting to be furnished with stars. Space stretches. It bends. It carries galaxies away from one another the way a river carries leaves, not because the leaves are swimming, but because the water beneath them is moving. This is the quiet, strange truth of cosmic expansion. The distances between galaxies are growing, not because those galaxies are racing through space, but because space itself is expanding between them, patiently, relentlessly, in every direction at once. There is no center to this expansion. There is no single point you could return to and call the origin, the way you might return to a hometown. Wherever you stood in this universe, the same swelling would appear to happen all around you, as if you were the center of everything and also, somehow, the center of nothing at all. Now imagine trying to leave a trail home through a landscape like this. On Earth, if you wandered into a forest, you might tie a ribbon to a branch, or count your steps, or simply follow the sound of a nearby road. But space offers no branches, no ground, no steady hum of civilization drifting on the wind. And even if you could mark your path perfectly, the destination itself would not stay still long enough for the marks to matter. By the time light from a distant galaxy reaches your eyes, that galaxy has already moved. Not slightly, not by a negligible margin, but by an amount that, across billions of years, becomes almost unimaginable. You are not looking at where things are. You are looking at where things were, a fossil image of a universe that has already grown old and wandered elsewhere since the light first left its surface. This is perhaps one of the most quietly disorienting truths in all of astronomy. Every photograph of the night sky is also a photograph of the past. The starlight touching your skin tonight may have begun its journey before your grandparents were born, before your country existed, before your language had words for the things you now use to describe it. Some of the light overhead began traveling toward Earth before humans learned to walk upright. It has been in transit longer than memory, longer than myth, arriving now, in this quiet moment, only because nothing interrupted its long fall through the dark. And by the time it lands gently in your eye, its source has already changed, moved, aged, perhaps even ceased to exist in the form that first sent it outward. So when we speak of finding your way home in deep space, we are not simply describing a long drive with an uncertain map. We are describing an environment where the very idea of a way assumes a kind of stability the universe does not actually offer. A path implies two fixed points and a route between them. But out there, one of those points, the destination, is being carried farther away by the expansion of space itself, and the other, you are moving to, spinning with a planet, orbiting a star, drifting with a galaxy that is itself falling gently through a slow cosmic current alongside its neighbors. Nothing holds still long enough to draw a straight line between it and anything else. And yet, this is not a story meant only to unsettle you. There is something oddly soothing in realizing that the universe was never built for simple point-to-point travel, was never designed like a highway system with clear exits and clean directions. It was built instead as a living, breathing expanse, a process rather than a place, forever becoming rather than simply being. To feel lost within something so magnificently in motion is not a personal failure of navigation. It is simply what it means to be a small, aware thing inside a much larger unfolding, one that does not pause to explain itself, one that does not owe you a fixed set of coordinates to return to, one that continues to stretch outward in the dark long after the light meant to guide you has already grown old, and faded, and quietly dimmed into the deep, patient dark from which it came. Think, for a while, about what it would actually take to send a signal home, if home was something you could still call by that name after traveling far enough into the silence. Even light, the fastest messenger the universe permits, moves at a pace that begins to feel achingly slow once distance grows large enough. A radio signal from the edge of our own solar system already takes hours to arrive. A message from the nearest star beyond our sun would need more than 4 years just to cross the gap, one lonely photon after another, threading itself through the dark. And this is only the nearest star, the closest possible neighbor in a galaxy that holds hundreds of billions of others, scattered across a disk so wide that light itself needs roughly 100,000 years merely to cross from one edge to the other. To call home, in any meaningful sense, from somewhere near the heart of the galaxy, would mean sending a message that your distant descendants, generations upon generations removed from you, might someday receive, if anyone remained who still remembered what the message meant, or why it had been sent, or who had sent it in the first place. There is a peculiar kind of grief hidden inside that thought, but also, if you let it settle slowly, a peculiar kind of peace. Because distance, in deep space, is never only about miles or kilometers. It is inseparable from time. To travel far is also to travel forward, away from the moment you left, away from the people who knew you then, away from a version of home that continues changing back on Earth even while you are gone. Einstein's description of relativity teaches us something quietly staggering here. Time itself does not move at the same rate for everyone. It bends, gently, depending on speed and gravity. A traveler moving close to the speed of light would experience time passing more slowly than those left behind. Only a few years might pass for the traveler, while decades or centuries unfold back on the world they departed. This is not science fiction. It has been measured, tested, confirmed in smaller ways, again and again, in orbiting satellites and atomic clocks that drift by fractions of a second exactly as the equations predict. Time is not a steady, uniform river flowing the same for everyone. It is more like countless small streams, each shaped by its own speed and gravity, occasionally rejoining, occasionally drifting permanently apart. So imagine, if you will, a traveler venturing outward at a significant fraction of light speed, chasing some distant star simply to see it up close, to stand, metaphorically, in a place no human eye has ever witnessed directly. For that traveler, the journey might feel like a handful of years, a long but bearable stretch of solitude and starlight. But upon returning, if return were even possible, Earth would have aged far beyond them. The home they remembered would no longer exist in any recognizable form. Cities would have risen and crumbled. Languages would have shifted. The faces they loved would be long gone, and even the descendants of those faces might carry only distant, second-hand memories of the person who once left. This is the quiet cruelty folded into the vastness of space. The very act of traveling far enough to explore it can strand you not just physically, but temporally, adrift not only in place, but in time itself, a stranger not just to a new star system, but to your own future. And still, there is no malice in any of this. The universe does not punish explorers. It simply operates according to laws that were in motion long before life first stirred anywhere within it, laws that do not pause to consider human attachment, human longing, human need for continuity and closeness. Gravity curves space the way a heavy stone curves the surface of a still pond, and anything nearby, including light, including time, bends around that curvature without protest, without awareness, without any concept of what it might mean to a mind capable of missing someone. The universe is not cruel. It is simply indifferent, vast beyond calculation, and utterly unconcerned with the small, aching hearts that occasionally drift across its surface, wondering how to find their way back to something familiar. Perhaps this is why so many stories about deep space eventually become stories about longing rather than distance, about the ache of separation rather than the mechanics of travel. Because the true difficulty was never simply crossing so many kilometers or years. The true difficulty was always this: that space and time together conspire, gently but absolutely, to make certain that once you travel far enough, home stops being a fixed point you can simply return to, and instead becomes something suspended permanently behind you, glowing faintly, growing fainter, less like a destination and more like a memory you can still almost touch. If only the light would move just a little faster. If only the distance would shrink just a little smaller. If only the universe would, just this once, bend its rules to make the return journey easier than the leaving ever was. But the universe rarely offers such mercies, and so we are left to consider another quiet obstacle to finding your way home, one that has nothing to do with speed or signals, and everything to do with orientation itself. On Earth, we take for granted the presence of landmarks, fixed points against which everything else can be measured. Mountains stay where they are, for the length of a human life. Coastlines shift slowly enough to feel permanent. Even the stars overhead seem, to casual observation, to hold their positions night after night, forming constellations we can name and trust, patterns that our ancestors used to navigate oceans and deserts with remarkable precision. But this apparent stillness is, itself, a kind of illusion, granted to us only by the shortness of a human lifetime measured against the age of the galaxy. The stars are not fixed. They are moving, each one traveling along its own vast orbit around the center of the Milky Way, carried by gravity in slow, sweeping arcs that take hundreds of millions of years to complete even a single revolution. Our own sun, together with Earth and all its companion planets, moves at roughly 230 kilometers every second, and still, at that tremendous speed, it takes approximately 230 million years just to complete one full orbit around the galactic center. In the time it takes our solar system to circle home once, entire mountain ranges have risen and eroded away on Earth, species have appeared, flourished, and vanished, and the very shape of the continents has shifted enough to be unrecognizable to what came before. And yet, from where we stand, the stars seem to hang there patiently, unmoving, as though placed deliberately to guide us. It is only a trick of scale, a gift of brief perspective, that lets us imagine the sky as something dependable. Now extend this thought outward, past our galaxy entirely, into the deeper dark where other galaxies drift like scattered embers across an impossibly large hearth. Each of those galaxies is moving too, not only through space, but away from every other galaxy, carried outward on the same expanding tide we spoke of earlier. If you were to travel far enough from home, past the edge of the Milky Way, past the small cluster of galaxies gravitationally bound to our own, you would eventually reach a region where the galaxies visible to you would be entirely different from the ones visible near Earth. The night sky itself would be unrecognizable. No familiar constellations. No steady, comforting patterns passed down through generations of sailors and shepherds and stargazers. Just a foreign scattering of light, arranged by a universe utterly indifferent to what any observer might find easy to memorize. This is why, even with the most advanced instruments imaginable, navigating home across truly interstellar or intergalactic distances becomes less like following a map and more like trying to remember the exact shape of a wave after it has already dissolved back into the ocean. The reference points themselves are not stationary enough to trust. Space does not hold still long enough to be marked permanently by any single arrangement of stars. It is less like a room, furnished and fixed, and more like a slow, endless tide, forever reshaping itself in ways too vast and too gradual to notice within the span of an ordinary life. And here, quietly, is where the deeper poetry of the situation begins to surface. Because if the stars themselves are not fixed, if even galaxies drift and scatter, if the very fabric of space stretches and curves and carries everything within it along paths too immense to fully grasp, then the idea of a single, unchanging home becomes something far more delicate than we usually imagine. Home was never truly a fixed point in the universe. It was always a fragile agreement between timing and place, a brief coincidence of a particular planet, a particular star, a particular arrangement of light and gravity, all aligning just long enough for something like memory and belonging to take root. To lose your way in deep space, then, is not simply to become lost the way one might become lost in an unfamiliar city. It is to be reminded, gently and completely, that the entire universe is built on motion rather than permanence, that everything, including the very notion of a settled place to return to, is temporary, drifting, subject to change on timescales too enormous for a single lifetime to witness directly. And knowing this, strangely, does not have to feel like loss. It can feel instead like an invitation to hold home a little more tenderly, precisely because it was never as permanent as it seemed, precisely because somewhere out there, galaxies are still drifting apart in the dark, carrying with them the quiet truth that everything we love is only ever borrowed for a while, held gently against the vast, indifferent backdrop of time, and then, just as gently, released. Consider, now, what it would mean to actually build a map of home from somewhere far enough away that Earth itself becomes invisible, a task that sounds simple only until you try to imagine it in practice. From the outer edges of our own solar system, Earth already fades into something barely distinguishable from the surrounding dark, a pale, faint speck lost in the glare of a sun that itself begins to look like just another star. This is not exaggeration or poetic license. It is documented fact, captured in a single quiet photograph taken decades ago by a spacecraft leaving our solar system behind, a photograph that shows Earth as nothing more than a tiny, pale dot suspended in a beam of scattered light. From that distance already, home is nearly impossible to distinguish from anything else in the frame. Extend that distance further, past the orbit of the outermost planets, past the heliopause where the sun's influence finally fades into the greater interstellar medium, and Earth disappears entirely, swallowed by the same darkness that swallows everything else too small or too dim to catch the eye. Now imagine trying to find your way back to something you cannot even see, using only the position of stars whose true distances are difficult to judge with the naked eye. Parallax, the gentle shifting of a star's apparent position as Earth moves along its orbit, works remarkably well for measuring distances to relatively nearby stars, but becomes less reliable the farther out you look, the angles becoming too small, too delicate, to measure with any real confidence. Beyond a certain distance, astronomers must rely on other methods entirely, indirect calculations built from the brightness of certain types of stars, or the redshift of light stretched by cosmic expansion, methods powerful in their own right, but far removed from anything resembling a simple, reliable sense of direction. There is no glowing arrow pointing back toward a small, blue and green planet. There is no beacon bright enough to be seen from truly interstellar distances. Earth's light, and all the light of human civilization gathered together, radio waves, television broadcasts, the accumulated static hum of billions of daily lives, spreads outward too thin, too faint, to ever be gathered back into a single, findable point once you are far enough away. This is perhaps one of the strangest truths hidden within the search for home in deep space. The very light that might reveal our presence to the universe is the same light that fades hopelessly with distance, weakening according to precise, unforgiving mathematics, the intensity of any signal dropping according to the inverse square of the distance it travels. Double the distance, and the signal grows 4 times weaker. Multiply that distance by 100, and the signal becomes 10,000 times fainter still. Across truly interstellar distances, distances measured not in kilometers but in light-years, the accumulated broadcast signals of an entire civilization become so faint that they blend seamlessly into the natural background noise of the universe itself, indistinguishable from the quiet hiss of cosmic radiation left over from the earliest moments after the Big Bang. In this sense, home does not merely become hard to find. It becomes, for all practical purposes, silent, a place that exists vividly and completely for those still living upon it, but essentially invisible and inaudible to anyone drifting far enough away. And yet, even within this silence, there is something worth pausing on gently, without rushing toward despair. Because the same laws that make home difficult to find from a great distance are the very laws that also protect it, in a strange, quiet way, from being disturbed by anything else out there. If our signals fade into whispers too faint to notice, then perhaps so do the signals of countless other worlds we have never detected, other quiet civilizations living out their own version of home beneath other skies, equally hidden, equally protected by the same vast, muffling silence of space. The universe's difficulty in connecting distant points may be less a tragedy and more a kind of built-in solitude, a natural buffer that lets each small pocket of life exist privately, undisturbed, cradled within its own corner of the dark. To be lost, in this sense, is also to be sheltered, folded quietly into a universe too large to notice you completely, too vast to interfere, too busy sustaining its own endless expansion to reach down and disrupt the small, fragile warmth glowing gently on a distant blue world, still spinning, still orbiting, still faithfully catching the light of a star that has not yet realized how easily it, too, could be lost among 100 billion siblings scattered through this one galaxy alone. There is a particular comfort in that kind of anonymity, though it may not seem so at first. Consider what it would mean to be found, truly found, by something crossing the gulf between stars. The distances involved are not simply large. They are large in a way that reshapes the meaning of the word itself. 4 light-years to the nearest star is already a span that light, moving at its impossible unbroken speed, needs 4 years to cross. And Proxima Centauri is close. A neighbor. A near thing by the standards of this galaxy. Beyond it, the numbers stretch into ranges the mind can recite but never quite hold. 26,000 light-years to the galactic core. 100,000 light-years across the disk of the Milky Way. 2.5 million light-years to Andromeda, our nearest large galactic companion, its light only now arriving, having left before there were humans to receive it. Distance, at this scale, becomes a kind of mercy. Because to send a signal is to risk being heard by something you did not choose to speak to. And to be heard is to be, in some sense, exposed. The stillness of space, then, is not simply an obstacle standing between us and connection. It is also a wall, thick and patient, holding back whatever else might be moving out there in the dark, unseen, unhurried, indifferent to us in ways we may never need to understand. Some who study these possibilities describe the universe as eerily quiet, given how old it is, given how many stars have had time to kindle life if life is common at all. This is sometimes called the Fermi question, the puzzle of the great silence, and it has never been resolved. Perhaps life is rare. Perhaps it is common but short-lived, flickering out before it learns to reach very far. Or perhaps it lasts, and simply stays where it is, because the alternative, stretching outward into a universe built on distances that erase almost anything sent across them, does not offer much reward for the risk. Whatever the reason, the quiet holds. And within that quiet, small worlds like this one are allowed to continue their slow turning without external notice. Earth's atmosphere, its oceans, its long, uninterrupted stretch of biological time, over 3.5 billion years of it, unfolded without correction from outside, without instruction, without any hand but the patient hand of physics and chemistry working alone in the dark. Whatever happened here, happened privately. Whatever is happening here now, in this very moment, someone reading these words in the hush before sleep, a heart slowing, a mind loosening its grip on the day, is happening in a kind of cosmic seclusion so complete that nothing beyond this solar system has any way of knowing it at all. This is not loneliness in the way loneliness is usually felt, sharp and aching and wanting to be filled. It is closer to the quiet of a house at night, when every room has gone dark except the one you are sitting in, and the rest of the world has receded into something distant and unbothered by your presence. The light from this room does not reach very far. But it does not need to. It only needs to keep burning here, tended, sustained, sufficient to itself. And there is something almost tender in the physics of it. Light does travel. It leaves us, second after second, radio waves drifting outward in a thickening shell that has been expanding since the first broadcasts of the last century, an ever-widening bubble carrying trace echoes of human voices, human music, human noise, out past the orbit of Neptune, out past the heliosphere, out into the region between stars where the solar wind can no longer hold its ground against the pressure of interstellar space. That bubble, faint as it is real. It is out there, moving, thinning, fading by the mile, and somewhere within it, still, impossibly, are fragments of songs and voices that once meant something to someone, drifting now toward no one in particular, addressed to the whole of the dark at once and to nothing at all. It will likely never be heard. The signal weakens by the square of the distance it travels, a quiet mathematical law that shows no mercy and plays no favorites, and by the time that bubble reaches even the nearest stars, it will have thinned into something less than whisper, less than breath, a signal so faint it could pass directly through a listening antenna on some other world and leave no trace at all in the noise. And yet it is still moving, still spreading, still, in its own faint and fading way, a kind of reaching outward that continues long after the reaching has become impossible to notice, carried forward not by any hope of arrival but by the same relentless, indifferent momentum that carries everything else in this universe, the same momentum that once sent the first light of the first stars. Outward across a universe still young enough, then, to be mostly empty, mostly dark, waiting for something to fill it with meaning. That light is still arriving. Some of it is arriving now, tonight, falling onto the upturned lens of some observatory perched on a cold mountaintop, or into the quiet, dark-adapted eye of someone lying on their back in a field far from any city, someone who has no way of knowing that the point of light they are watching may have stopped existing millennia before their grandparents were born. This is one of the strange mercies of looking upward. The sky does not show us what is. It shows us what was, layered and overlapping, 1,000 different moments in time arriving together in a single glance, as if the universe had gathered its whole history into one quiet ceiling and asked us only to look, not to understand. There is a certain peace available in that confusion, if one is willing to let go of the need to resolve it. Because, in a way, none of us have ever seen the universe as it is in this instant. We have only ever seen its past, its echoes, its old and traveling light. The star that seems to hover just above the horizon this evening may have already collapsed, may have already scattered its outer layers across the dark in a slow, silent supernova, and the news of that ending, sent out at the speed of light, may simply not have reached us yet. It is on its way. It has been on its way for years, for centuries, for spans of time longer than most civilizations have existed, folded quietly into the dark, patient, unhurried, indifferent to whether anyone below is ready to receive it. This delay, this soft and endless lag between what happens and what is known, is not a flaw in the universe. It is closer to a kind of built-in gentleness, though it rarely feels that way when named directly. It means that grief, should it ever need to travel across such distances, arrives late, and softened, diffused across the long crossing, so that by the time the light of a dying star reaches the eyes of some future observer, the dying itself is already ancient history, already resolved, already absorbed back into the slow churn of stellar recycling. The heavy elements it forged in its final moments drifting outward to seed the next generation of stars, the next generation of planets, perhaps. Even the next generation of something that might, given enough time, learn to look up and wonder about its own beginnings. Every atom of iron in the marrow of every bone reading these words tonight was forged this way, inside the collapsing heart of some star long since gone, some star whose final light left it before the sun itself had condensed out of the same slow, spinning cloud of gas and dust. And so the very body listening to this narration in the dark is, in some literal and unglamorous sense, an assembly of old starlight, cooled and shaped and folded into the particular pattern that happens, for now, to be breathing, to be resting, to be drifting gently towards sleep. That is not a metaphor stretched too far. It is simply chemistry, patient and exact, carried out over billions of years by processes with no interest in whether anyone ever noticed the outcome. Perhaps this is part of why the search for home in deep space feels so difficult, so laced with a particular kind of sorrow. Because home, in the end, was never a fixed point to be located on some vast coordinate grid, a set of numbers to be triangulated against the slow wheel of the stars. It was always something closer to a process, a continuity, a pattern of atoms borrowed briefly from the wreckage of old stars and arranged, for a while, into something that could feel the cold of a night sky and wonder about its origins. The wondering itself is temporary. The atoms are not. They will return, eventually, to the same great cycle that made them, scattered back into the ground, absorbed into new grass, new rivers, new bodies that will look up at slightly different stars arranged in slightly different patterns, unaware of what came before them, unaware that the calcium in their teeth or the oxygen in their lungs might once have belonged to someone who also lay very still, on a night much like this one, trying to find their way home across a distance too vast to be measured in anything but light and time and loss. And still, despite all of this, despite the impossible distances and the vanishing signals and the slow, indifferent churn of stellar recycling, there remains something quietly, stubbornly persistent about the search itself. Not the finding, necessarily, but the searching, the reaching upward, the refusal to stop looking simply because the odds of arrival are so small. It is there in the first radio dishes turned skyward decades ago, patient instruments listening into the static for some pattern that was never truly expected to arrive, only hoped for, the way a person might leave a porch light on long after everyone they were waiting for has stopped coming home. It is there in the golden records carried outward on the Voyager probes, two small spacecraft launched in the late 1970s, each one carrying a gold-plated disc etched with sounds and images meant to explain, in the barest outline, what it was to be alive here, on this particular world, at this particular moment. Whale song, a mother's laughter, the rhythm of a human heartbeat, recorded and pressed into copper, sealed in aluminum, sent outward on a trajectory that would eventually carry it beyond the edge of the solar wind and into the true dark between stars. Both probes have now crossed that threshold. Both now drift through interstellar space, farther from home than anything built by human hands has ever traveled, still transmitting, faintly, on power sources that grow dimmer every year, their signals arriving back at Earth after a journey of many hours, weak enough now that only the most sensitive instruments on the ground can still hear them at all. There is something unbearably tender about this, if one sits with it slowly enough. These are not weapons. They are not declarations of conquest or dominion. They are messages in bottles, cast into an ocean so vast that the bottles themselves will likely drift for longer than the species that built them will exist. Voyager 1 is not heading toward any particular star. It will not arrive anywhere, not in any meaningful sense, for tens of thousands of years, and even then, it will only pass near another star system, not through it, a near miss measured across a span of time that dwarfs the entirety of recorded human history. In about 40,000 years, it will drift within roughly 1.5 light-years of a small star called Gliese 445, not close enough to be noticed, not close enough to be received, simply close enough, in the vast arithmetic of space, to count as a near neighbor for a fleeting moment before continuing onward, forever, into the dark. Forever is not an exaggeration here. It is closer to the literal truth. There is nothing to stop these two small spacecraft. No friction to slow them, no atmosphere to burn them, no gravity strong enough to reliably pull them back. They will drift, silent eventually, their power long since exhausted, their gold records unplayed by anything but the possibility of being found, for a length of time that outlasts the sun itself, outlasts the eventual swelling of the sun into a red giant, outlasts the slow cooling of the Earth long after that swelling has ended. In some very real sense, these two small objects, launched by a species barely a few 100,000 years into its own existence, may turn out to be among the most durable things that species ever makes. Longer lived than any pyramid. Longer lived than any language. Longer lived, quite possibly, than the very idea of humanity itself, once time has worn all other traces away. And yet they were not built to last forever in any boastful sense. They were built simply to try. To send something outward, however faint the odds, however small the chance of ever being noticed by anything capable of noticing. This may be the quiet, essential truth beneath all of this searching, all of this listening, all of this decades-long turning of dishes and lenses toward a sky that rarely answers. It was never really about the odds. It was about the reaching itself, the simple, stubborn insistence on trying to close a distance that mathematics insists cannot be closed, not meaningfully, not within any span of time a single life, or a single civilization, could hope to witness. Perhaps this is not so different from other kinds of reaching, closer to home, more familiar, more human in scale. A letter written to someone who may never read it. A name spoken quietly into the dark, long after the person who once answered to it has gone. A light left on in a window, not because anyone is expected, but because leaving it on costs so little, and turning it off would mean, in some small private way, admitting that the waiting is over. Space, in this sense, does not only teach distance. It teaches a particular kind of patience, the kind that does not require an answer to remain meaningful, the kind that finds its worth in the act of reaching, not in the certainty of being received. Somewhere above the atmosphere tonight, silent and dim and moving at over 38,000 miles an hour, Voyager 1 continues on its long, unanswered path, carrying its small gold record of birdsong and greetings in 55 languages, still traveling, still faithful, still reaching toward a future audience it will almost certainly never meet. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the reaching was always the point, not the arrival, not the answer, but the quiet and deliberate act of sending something outward anyway, into a silence that offers no guarantees. Consider, for a moment, how strange it is that we measure so much of this journey not in miles but in time. Light hours. Light years. Distance folded into duration, as though space itself refuses to be separated from the passage of time that crossing it requires. When mission controllers speak to Voyager 1 now, the command takes over 22 hours to arrive, and the confirmation that it was received takes another 22 hours to return. A single exchange, a simple back and forth, consumes the better part of 2 days. This is not a technological limitation waiting to be solved with some future upgrade. It is the speed of light itself, fixed, unchangeable, woven into the deepest architecture of the universe. Nothing travels faster. Not information, not gravity, not even the strange entangled correlations of quantum particles, which, despite their reputation for spookiness, still cannot be used to send a message any faster than light allows. This is simply how the universe is built, and no amount of longing changes it. There is a peculiar comfort, though, in something so absolute. In a universe where so much feels uncertain, where so much shifts and erodes and rearranges itself over time, the speed of light remains constant, unmoved, a single fixed thread running through the fabric of everything. Even as galaxies drift apart, even as stars are born and collapse and scatter their elements back into the dark, the speed at which light crosses the space between them does not change. It is one of the few promises the universe keeps without exception. And so when we speak of distance in space, we are, in a very real way, speaking of a kind of trust that the light leaving a star tonight will continue moving at exactly the same unwavering pace it always has, that the numbers describing its journey will hold steady across spans of time too long to comprehend, that somewhere in the vast bookkeeping of physics, this one rule will never be broken. It is easy, lying in the dark, listening to a voice describe these things, to feel very small. And in most practical senses, that feeling is accurate. The Earth is a modest world orbiting an unremarkable star in the outer reaches of one spiral arm of one ordinary galaxy among what is estimated to be some 2 trillion others, scattered across a universe whose full extent may be far larger than the portion we can ever observe, hidden beyond a horizon defined not by mountains or oceans but by the finite age of the universe itself, which is roughly 13.8 billion years old, meaning there are regions of space whose light, even now, has not had time to reach us, and in some cases, due to the accelerating expansion of space, never will. There are galaxies out there we will never see, not because they are too dim, not because our instruments are too weak, but because the space between us and them is stretching faster than light can cross it, a slow and permanent kind of separation woven into the very geometry of the cosmos. And yet, smallness, considered slowly enough, does not have to feel like diminishment. It can feel instead like specificity, like being precisely located within something enormous rather than lost within it. To be small in a universe this vast is also to be exact, to be a particular arrangement of matter occupying a particular point in space and time, unrepeated, unrepeatable, held together for a while by the same physical laws that govern the burning of every star and the drifting of every galaxy. There is nothing else, anywhere, doing exactly what this arrangement is doing right now. Even if the universe is filled with life, even if 1,000 other worlds are, at this very moment, cradling their own quiet forms of awareness beneath their own unfamiliar skies, none of them are having this experience, this specific unfolding, this particular breath drawn in the dark while listening to a voice describe the slow architecture of distance. Perhaps that is closer to what home actually means, when all the coordinates fail, when all the maps run out, when the light years stretch too far for any signal to meaningfully cross. Not a location fixed against some galactic backdrop, not a set of numbers that could, in principle, be recovered by some future explorer piecing together fragments of old transmissions. Something quieter than that. Something closer to a felt sense of being situated, of being made from the same slow-cooked stardust as everything else, of belonging to a lineage that stretches back through supernovae and nebulae and the patient accumulation of matter into shapes that could, eventually, wonder about themselves. Consider, for a moment, what it would actually take to give directions home from somewhere truly far. Not far in the way a city on the other side of an ocean is far, but far in the way that light itself becomes a kind of fossil, carrying information about a place that may have already changed beyond recognition by the time that information arrives anywhere at all. If you were drifting somewhere out past the edge of the Oort cloud, that vast and mostly theoretical shell of icy bodies that may extend nearly a light-year from the sun itself would no longer be the blinding, undeniable presence it is from here. It would be a star among stars. Bright, perhaps. Distinguishable, perhaps, if you knew exactly where to look and had the right instruments and enough patience. But no longer self-evident. No longer the thing that simply announces itself as the center of everything, the way it does to a creature standing on a summer lawn with its eyes closed, feeling warmth on its face and never once needing to ask where that warmth is coming from. That is the strange privilege of being close to your star. You never have to search for home. It searches for you every morning, whether you asked it to or not. Move far enough away, and that privilege dissolves. The astronomers who study stellar neighborhoods often speak of something called the interstellar medium, the thin and scattered material, mostly hydrogen, mostly nearly nothing, that fills the space between stars. It sounds empty when described that way, and in a sense it is unimaginably empty, a vacuum so complete that entire regions of it contain, on average, less than 1 atom per cubic centimeter. And yet it is not featureless. It has structure. It has slow currents and magnetic fields threading through it like invisible rivers, shaping the paths of cosmic rays, nudging the trajectories of dust grains that drift for millions of years before they ever encounter anything solid enough to call a destination. To move through that medium, to actually travel between stars rather than simply imagining the journey from the safety of a planet's surface, would mean accepting that distance itself is not a fixed and stable thing. It behaves differently depending on what is doing the measuring. Light itself takes years, decades, centuries, to cross gaps that feel, on a star chart, like the width of a fingernail. This is part of why deep space navigation resists the tidy logic of ordinary maps. A map assumes a kind of stillness. It assumes that if you mark a location today, that location will still mean something tomorrow, that the paper will not betray you, that the coordinates will not quietly drift out from under your feet while you were looking elsewhere. But nothing in the universe is actually still. The sun is not a fixed point. It is caught in its own long orbit around the center of the Milky Way, completing one full circuit roughly every 220 to 230 million years, a journey so vast that the last time the solar system was in this exact position relative to the galactic core, there were no flowering plants on Earth, no birds, nothing that could be called a mammal in any recognizable sense. And the galaxy itself is not fixed either. It is falling, slowly, inexorably, toward the Andromeda galaxy, the two of them drawn together by gravity across 2.5 million light-years of mostly empty space, destined to merge in some distant future that no version of us, in any form we would currently recognize, will likely be present to witness. So when a voice in the dark describes the architecture of distance, it is not describing something solid. It is describing a relationship between moving things, a fragile and temporary alignment, the way a photograph captures a single instant of light bouncing off a face that is already, in that very moment, changing. Home, defined as a set of coordinates, is always coordinates for a version of the universe that no longer quite exists by the time you finish writing them down. And perhaps this is why the ache of being lost in deep space feels different from the ache of being lost on Earth. On Earth, lost is temporary. It resolves. You find a road, a river, a familiar shape of hills against the horizon, and the lostness dissolves back into knowing. But in deep space, distance is not an inconvenience waiting to be solved. It is closer to a fundamental property of existing at all, the way gravity is a fundamental property, the way time moving forward is a fundamental property. You do not escape it by trying harder. You do not out-navigate it with a better instrument or a more patient calculation. It is simply the shape of the room you are standing in, a room with walls measured not in feet or miles, but in the number of years it would take a single photon, moving at the fastest speed the universe permits, to travel from where you are to where anyone might be listening. And still, somehow, none of that erases the strange, persistent pull toward the idea of return. Even knowing all of this, even understanding, on some quiet intellectual level, that the coordinates keep dissolving, that the map keeps rewriting itself, there remains something in the mind that keeps reaching backward, keeps asking not where home is exactly, but whether the question even makes sense out here, so far from the gravity wells and familiar sunlight that once made the question simple. It is a strange kind of ache, this reaching. Not quite grief, not quite longing, but something adjacent to both, the way a phantom limb might ache for a hand that is technically still attached, just numb, just distant, just difficult to feel in the way it once felt automatic and unremarkable. Consider what the Voyager probes carry with them, out past the heliopause, out into the region where the sun's influence finally gives way to true interstellar space. Voyager 1 crossed that boundary in August of 2012, and Voyager 2 followed in November of 2018, each of them slipping quietly out of the bubble carved by the solar wind and into the colder, stranger medium beyond. They carry golden records, phonograph discs etched with sounds and images meant to explain, to some hypothetical future listener, what it was like to be alive on a small blue world circling an unremarkable yellow star. Greetings in dozens of languages. The sound of a heartbeat. Whale song. Buck. And embedded in that gesture is something achingly human, something that has nothing to do with the practical odds of the records ever being found, ever being played, ever being understood by any mind capable of parsing them at all. The odds are vanishingly small. Space is too large, too empty, too indifferent for a small golden disk to matter in any statistical sense. And yet the gesture was made anyway. Not because it was likely to succeed, but because the reaching itself seemed to matter, the reaching itself seemed to be its own kind of home, a way of saying, across a distance too vast for any answer to arrive within a human lifetime, we were here, we existed, we wanted to be known. That impulse, to send something outward even knowing it will likely never be received, mirrors something quieter and more internal. The way a person lying awake in the dark might think of someone far away, might send a thought outward with no real expectation that the thought will land, will register, will change anything about the distance separating them. And yet the sending itself does something. It orients the mind. It creates, however briefly, a felt direction, even in the absence of any actual coordinate system capable of pointing the way. Astronomers have their own version of this reaching, though they would rarely describe it in such intimate terms. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, the quiet decades-long project of pointing radio telescopes at patches of sky and listening for some pattern that could not be explained by pulsars or quasars or the ordinary background hum of a universe going about its business, is itself an act of reaching outward without any guarantee of return. The Arecibo message, broadcast in 1974 toward the globular cluster M13, was sent knowing that M13 lies roughly 25,000 light-years away, meaning that even if the message were received and answered immediately, the reply would not arrive back on Earth for 50,000 years. No one who sent that message will ever know if it was received. No one who sent that message expected to know. And still it was sent, a binary pattern encoding numbers, a stylized image of a human figure, a crude sketch of the very radio telescope that transmitted it, all folded into a signal that will keep traveling, silently, indifferently, long after every trace of the civilization that sent it has changed beyond recognition. There is something almost unbearably tender in that. A species reaching toward the dark not because it expects to be answered within any meaningful time frame, but because reaching seems to be, in itself, a kind of orientation. A way of saying, even here, even this far from anything we could call familiar, we are still capable of turning ourselves towards something larger than our immediate circumstances. We are still capable of imagining a listener, even an impossible one, even one separated from us by tens of thousands of years of light traveling in a straight line through the cold vacuum between stars. Perhaps that is another shape that home can take out here, in the space between the coordinates that keep dissolving and the maps that keep rewriting themselves. Not a place found, but a gesture made. Not a location arrived at, but a signal sent outward in good faith, regardless of whether anything will ever answer it. The golden records drifting past the edge of the solar system are not going home, and they are not coming home. They are simply moving, at roughly 17 kilometers per second in the case of Voyager 1, carrying their small cargo of human sound into a darkness so vast that the very concept of arrival stops meaning very much at all. And yet the act of sending them was, in its own way, complete. It did not require a destination to become meaningful. It became meaningful the moment it was released, the moment the gesture of reaching outward was made, regardless of what silence waited on the other side. And maybe this is what it means to drift light years from anything familiar and still not feel entirely lost, because somewhere in the act of noticing the distance, of naming it, of feeling its weight settle into the chest like something almost physical, a kind of quiet reorientation takes place. Not toward a location, toward a stance. A way of holding oneself in relation to the dark that does not depend on knowing exactly where the dark ends. There is a concept in astronomy called the cosmic distance ladder, a patchwork of overlapping techniques that astronomers use to measure how far away things are, each rung reliable only within a certain range, each rung depending on the one below it to calibrate its assumptions. Parallax works for the nearest stars, the tiny apparent shift in position measured against a more distant background as Earth moves from one side of its orbit to the other. Beyond that, astronomers rely on standard candles, objects like certain pulsating stars called Cepheid variables, whose brightness relates predictably to how often they pulse, allowing their true luminosity to be inferred and then compared against how dim they appear from here, a comparison that yields distance. Beyond that, for the truly vast gulfs between galaxies, astronomers turn to Type Ia supernovae, the explosive deaths of white dwarf stars that reach a consistent mass threshold before detonating, making them bright enough and predictable enough to serve as beacons across billions of light years. Each rung of this ladder is an act of trust, a willingness to build outward from what is known toward what can only be inferred, each measurement slightly less certain than the one before it, each step outward into the dark requiring faith in the steps already taken. There is something almost devotional in that structure. A civilization patiently building a ladder of trust across billions of years of cosmic history, not because certainty was ever fully available, but because approximate knowledge, carefully checked and rechecked, was better than no knowledge at all. And perhaps that mirrors something quieter, something more personal. The way a person navigates their own sense of belonging not through absolute certainty but through a similar ladder of trust, small proofs stacked upon small proofs, this memory confirming that relationship, this sensation confirming that this body is still the one you have always lived inside of, this breath confirming that despite the vastness pressing in from every direction, there is still a here from which to measure everything else. Out past the reach of any standard candle, past even the most distant supernova reliably measured, the universe does not stop. It simply becomes harder to describe with any confidence. Cosmologists estimate that the observable universe stretches some 93 billion light-years across, a number that already strains ordinary intuition, and yet even that staggering distance describes only the portion of the universe whose light has had time to reach us since the beginning of cosmic expansion. Beyond that boundary, more universe almost certainly exists, unseen, unmeasured, causally disconnected from anything happening here, forever inaccessible not because of any technological limitation but because the space between here and there is expanding faster than light could ever cross it. This is one of the strangest and most humbling facts in modern cosmology, that there are regions of the universe we will never observe, not because we lack the instruments, but because the geometry of spacetime itself has placed them permanently out of reach. Sit with that for a moment, in the quiet dark, in whatever place currently counts as home. Somewhere, Right now, there are galaxies whose light will never reach any telescope humanity could ever build, not in a million years, not in a billion, not ever, because the space between here and there is stretching too quickly for light to close the gap. Those galaxies are not gone. They are not hypothetical. They almost certainly exist, filled with their own stars, their own slow architectures of gas and dust collapsing into new suns, and yet they are, in the most literal sense possible, permanently unreachable. Not distant in the ordinary sense, where distance is something that could, in principle, be crossed given enough time and enough patience. Distant in a deeper sense, where the very fabric separating here from there is growing faster than anything could ever traverse it. And somehow, knowing this does not shrink the sense of belonging. If anything, it deepens it, in a way that is difficult to explain but easy to feel, lying still in the dark, listening to a voice describe distances too vast to fully imagine. Because if entire galaxies can exist forever beyond the reach of observation, and still be real, still be filled with their own quiet unfoldings, their own stars living and dying in patterns no one will ever witness, then perhaps being unreachable does not mean being unreal. Perhaps a person, a body, a particular flicker of awareness drifting through a particular night, does not need to be locatable on any grand cosmic map in order to matter, in order to be genuinely, fully here. The universe is already full of things that are real without being reachable. Perhaps that is not a tragedy. Perhaps that is simply the shape of existing inside something this large, something that stretches so far beyond any single vantage point that no one, not even the most patient astronomer with the most powerful telescope, could ever hope to see it all at once. Every vantage point is partial. Every observer, however powerful their instruments, is confined to a single narrow cone of visibility, a small wedge of the sky from which the rest of everything can only be inferred, imagined, trusted to exist without ever being directly confirmed. This is worth resting on for a while, because it changes the shape of what being lost actually means. To be lost, in the ordinary sense, implies that somewhere, from some vantage point, the correct location could be known. A parent searching for a child in a crowded space is not truly lost in the deep sense, because the child exists somewhere findable, somewhere that satellites and search parties and simple patient-looking could, in principle, locate. But the kind of lostness that settles over a mind drifting through the idea of deep space is different. It is not the lostness of misplaced coordinates. It is the lostness of understanding, fully and finally, that no vantage point exists from which the whole picture could ever be assembled. Not because no one has looked hard enough yet, but because the geometry of the universe itself forbids it. Light cones expand outward at a fixed and unbreakable speed, and no observer, however patient, however advanced, can ever occupy more than one point in spacetime at a time. To be anywhere is, necessarily, to not be everywhere else. This is not a flaw in the design of things. It is simply what it means to exist as a located being inside an unlocated universe. And there is something strangely comforting buried inside that limitation, once the mind stops fighting it. Because if no observer can ever see the whole of everything, then the particular slice each observer does see becomes, by necessity, irreplaceable. No one else stands exactly where you stand, looking out at exactly the configuration of stars visible from exactly this angle, on exactly this night, filtered through exactly this particular arrangement of thoughts and memories and half-formed feelings that make up a single, specific consciousness. The universe does not have a single canonical view of itself. It has billions of partial views, scattered across billions of vantage points, each one true, each one incomplete, each one absolutely necessary to whatever it means for the universe to be witnessed at all. Consider the light arriving right now from the Andromeda Galaxy, visible to the naked eye on a sufficiently dark night despite being some 2.5 million light-years away, meaning the light currently reaching any given eye left Andromeda long before modern humans existed in anything like their current form. That light is not a signal describing Andromeda as it is now. It is a fossil, a preserved fragment of a moment that has already receded impossibly far into Andromeda's own past, even as it arrives here as something that feels, for a fleeting instant, like present-tense seeing. Every act of looking outward into deep space is, in this sense, an act of looking backward through time, layered upon layered upon layered again, each star a different depth of history, each point of light in the sky offering testimony from a different era, all of it arriving together, simultaneously, in a single moment of human perception that stitches together timescales no single mind could otherwise hold. This is perhaps the deepest version of what it means to feel disoriented among the stars. Not simply that the distances are too vast to comprehend, though they are. Not simply that the coordinates keep shifting beneath any attempt to fix them, though they do. But that even the act of looking is itself an act of time travel, a blending of eras that have no business being witnessed together, and yet are, every single night, by anyone willing to lie still and look up. The night sky is not a snapshot. It is a collage, an impossible simultaneity of moments stretched across millions and billions of years, arriving all at once, indifferent to the fact that human perception was never built to properly metabolize something so vast. And still, somehow, the mind manages. Somehow, a single consciousness, briefly assembled from stardust that has traveled unimaginable distances and unimaginable timescales to arrive at this particular configuration, this particular thinking, breathing, wondering shape, manages to lie still beneath all of that layered light and feel something coherent. Not fully coherent, not fully resolved, but coherent enough to keep listening, coherent enough to keep drifting toward sleep despite the impossible scale of everything being described. Perhaps that itself is the quiet miracle worth noticing before the mind finally lets go entirely. Not that the universe makes sense. It does not fully, not in any way a human mind could ever hold without simplification. But that something as small and temporary as a single drifting awareness can hold even a fraction of that vastness without shattering, can rest inside contradictions too large to resolve, and still, somehow, find enough stillness to sleep. To let the eyes close, finally, beneath a sky too vast to finish reading, and trust that the vastness will still be there, unresolved and patient, whenever the eyes open again. Maybe this is the place to let the coordinates go entirely. Not as defeat, not as a failure of navigation, but as a kind of arrival that never needed coordinates in the first place. Somewhere above, the light of 100 billion stars is still falling, second by second, onto a world spinning quietly through the dark, and none of that light asks to be understood before it lands. It simply arrives. It touches whatever is there to receive it, a leaf, a lake, a closed eyelid, and in that touching, something is completed, however briefly, however small. Perhaps home was never a place the light needed to find. Perhaps home was always simply this, a surface soft enough to receive it. Think, for a moment, of the sheer improbability required to arrive at this particular stillness. A star had to form and burn for billions of years in careful, patient fusion, and eventually die, scattering the heavier elements it had spent its whole existence assembling, carbon and oxygen and iron and calcium, out into the surrounding dark. Those scattered elements had to drift, sometimes for eons, through the cold interstellar medium, occasionally gathering into denser clouds, occasionally collapsing under their own gravity into new stars, new planets, new possibilities. One of those planets had to settle into an orbit neither too close nor too far from its own star, within that narrow, forgiving band sometimes called the habitable zone, where water could remain liquid long enough for something extraordinary to happen. And on that planet, across nearly 4 billion years of chemistry slowly discovering its own complexity, something eventually crossed the threshold into what could be called life, and that life kept branching, kept dying, kept adapting, kept surviving asteroid impacts and ice ages and mass extinctions so severe they erased the vast majority of species that had ever existed, until finally, Against odds too large to meaningfully calculate, a lineage emerged capable of lying still in the dark and wondering about its own origins. This is not a story that had to happen. It is a story that did happen this one time, in this one place, threading through catastrophe after catastrophe until it arrived here, in this exact moment, in this exact body. Listening to this exact voice described the impossible architecture of everything that had to align for this listening to occur at all. There is no guarantee embedded anywhere in physics that awareness had to emerge from matter. And yet it did. Here. Improbably. Briefly. Perhaps that is the final shape worth resting inside, before sleep finally arrives. Not the idea of being lost among the stars, though that idea is true, and worth sitting with, and worth returning to. But the deeper, quieter idea underneath it, that being made of stardust, drifting briefly through consciousness before returning to the same slow cosmic cycle that produced it, is not a diminishment. It is not a small thing happening in an indifferent universe. It is, instead, the universe's own strange and roundabout way of pausing, for a moment, to notice itself. Every atom in this body was forged inside the collapsing core of some star that no longer exists, some star whose final moments scattered its contents across the galaxy long before the sun itself had condensed out of its own natal cloud. That history did not end when the star died. It simply changed shape, migrating slowly through billions of years and billions of miles, until it became, briefly, this exact configuration. This particular way of being arranged into something that can feel the weight of a blanket, hear the quiet cadence of a voice in the dark, and drift, gently, towards sleep. There is no need to know exactly where this is happening, relative to the galactic core, relative to Andromeda, relative to the edge of the observable universe stretching out in every direction. The coordinates were never the point. The point was always this: a temporary gathering of stardust, briefly aware of itself, resting inside a night sky old beyond imagining, letting go of the need to be located, and simply, quietly being here. Let the breathing slow. Let the shoulders loosen against whatever surface is holding this body right now. Let the vast, patient dark outside the window, or beyond the ceiling, or somewhere far past the reach of any window at all, continue doing what it has always done, indifferent and immense and strangely tender all at once. It does not need to be understood tonight. It does not need to be mapped, or measured, or finally, conclusively found. It only needs to be felt, for as long as the eyes remain closed, as the last edges of thought dissolve quietly into sleep, carried gently downward by the same slow gravity that has always, patiently, brought everything home.